familiar with Poplar Forest. He had just, as a young person and growing up, when he came here, he just was drawn to it. He developed a fascination with it and a regard for it. And when my brother was born, he was 7 years older than I am. He used to bring my brother out here. This was before the war, when he would come to visit Poplar Forest. And of course, he had come to know, he knew the Hutter family who then owned it, and particularly Christian Sixtus Hutter, who was the patriarch of the Hutters in that era, and who actually owned the house in the mid-40s, or in the 40s. And so he would bring my brother Jimmy out here, often with my mother as well. And then after the war was over, he came back to Lynchburg. My father, who was a lawyer in Lynchburg, continued to come out and visit Mr. Hutter and show Jimmy around out here. And it was just kind of something that everybody enjoyed. So one day in the summer of 1946, my father got a call, actually called him out of a meeting that he was in, from Mr. Hutter. And my father said, "Yes, Mr. Hutter, what can I do for you?" And he said, he just asked a question. He said, "Where is Jimmy?" Meaning my brother. And my father said, "Well, Mr. Hutter, I'm pretty sure he's in school." And Mr. Hutter said, "I know where he ought to be." And my father said, Mr. Hutter, after a pause, "Mr. Hutter, are you saying what I think you're saying?" And Mr. Hutter said, "Yeah, I am. I decided to sell Poplar Forest, and I want you to buy it, and I want Jimmy to grow up." So that's how we came to be here. He came out that afternoon, my father did, and they settled the whole deal that afternoon, and the deed was recorded in July of 1946. So that's when we began to own Poplar Forest. But we didn't move in until November of 1947, the fall of 1947, because the house had been used by the Hutters primarily as a summer place. And it didn't have central heating, I believe only 2 bathrooms in the house, only one for a long time. And so it wasn't ready for a young family. I should have mentioned, I have an older sister named Keith. And then I was born before we moved in. And so the 3 of us plus my parents. So a family with 3 young children needed to move into a house that had more comforts than this one did. And so there had to be a lot of renovation and construction done to the house. As well, my parents bought the house with the intention of actually restoring it to the original design. And I'll explain why in a minute, or why it needed to be restored to the original design. And had an architect lined up to do that. And so they wanted to get started on their plans in that regard during this time period where they would be doing a renovation. So anyway, that was the plan, but it took until November to be finished. I guess you might want to, I think I've covered this, but so the family was my father, Jimmy Watts, a lawyer from Richmond. My mother, Sarah Key Watts, who was, although her parents were Southerners, grew up in Manhattan, in New York, and so married my father and moved down here in 1938, all 5 feet and 90 pounds up. A true Yankee New Yorker. But and so she was here as well as my father, my sister, and my brother, as I've indicated. I want to also mention that there were some other important people here, including Gertrude and Courtney Clark, excuse me, who were a couple, African-American couple from Forest. Gertrude was from Forest, Courtney was from South Virginia, as well as Alice Carter, who was my baby nurse, and then our maid after that. They were very important people in my life here, and I just want to mention them as well. And actually their parents, because I, on more than one occasion, went to stay at Gertrude's parents' house when my parents were out of town. And so I knew them all well. So another question you might ask is, as a child, how aware were you of Jefferson's connection to your home? And the answer is totally aware. My earliest memories include my parents reminding us of Jefferson's association with this house and the according need for us to keep that in mind at all times and to respect and take care of this special place. But it was our home, and we had to use it as children, and things happen when children are involved. And did I break a window or two playing tennis against the wall out here? Yes, I did, but those were hard ones. I wasn't trying to break hard ones, but my point is they weren't original Jefferson glass. So, but that's how we looked at it. We also say that he was always referred to, Jefferson was, as Mr. Jefferson, never as anything but Mr. Jefferson. We set a place for him at the table on his birthday every year. And you see this bust back here. My father had in the center of this room an enormous mahogany partner's desk. You know what I mean by that? The two-sided desk. And it was in the center of this room. And so whenever you entered and came into this room from any direction, you had to go around his desk. And on it he had a bust just like that, except it was about half that size. And on Jefferson's birthday, there would be a red bow tied around his neck. So we were constantly aware of the significance of being here and how special it was, how fortunate we were to be here. So by the time my parents bought the place and the house, and I should mention, when it was bought, it was 1,001 acres, the property was. And so by the time that we bought it, it had undergone some significant changes from the original. There was, when the Hutters owned it, a fire in 1845. It was a major fire. It was started from that fireplace and badly designed, forgive me, Mr. Jefferson, flue, taking the smoke from that chimney up to meet another flue so that he didn't have the wrong number of chimneys. And the sparks went out on the roof and caught the roof on fire. Burned all of Jefferson's roof out. And this skylight and all of the decorative trim on the roof, both railing around the skylight and a balustrade around the edge of the roof. It burned interior the wood, and so the trim that you see in here now was not here in those days. This it's been restored to. This was the Hutters did not attempt to build the house back to Jefferson's original design. Who could have done that? Nobody could have done that, let alone in 1846. You needed Jefferson to do that. We effectively had Jefferson through his writings, and that's how we were able, the corporation was able to do it. So the interior of this house that I grew up in was Hutter plaster, and it had a simpler scheme of design. It was, instead of Palladian ancient Roman design, it was neoclassic Greek design, much simpler. So it was a simpler house inside. But Jefferson's original brick octagonal house survived the fire, and so that's what we moved into. So as part of the construction, my parents wanted to start, as I indicated, on restoration. So, I forgot to mention, when the Hutters rebuilt the house, they, for their own reasons, I don't know why, bricked up a number of the windows on the southwestern and southeastern wall. And maybe on the north, I honestly don't know that. But you can see, I mean, where's the, I meant to do this before, forgive me. I'm going to have to step over here, sorry. I'm talking about this window, this window, this window, this window, and this architectural drawing doesn't show you all the sides of the octagon, so there were additional windows that may have been affected by that as well. I just don't remember exactly how many there were. But anyway, my parents wanted to take care of those, and so had those restored. And the windows were not the original ones because they've been removed, but put those windows back in. This, I should also mention, this is a 20-foot cube, the original design, this room, which was his dining room, Jefferson's dining room. And they lowered, the Hutters who had obviously lost the skylight, wanted to have an attic up there. And so they lowered the ceiling of this room by 2.5 feet, I think I had that right. And then, so there was an attic between that and the top of the new roof. They did one other thing. You had to get to the attic from here. And so they added, beginning right here and extending up to about here, an encased stairway. There was a doorway here that opened to stairs that went up this wall and then turned right there and went up into the attic. And so that was all encased to a degree of about twice the size, the depth of this right here. And then right here in this corner, right behind me, the encasement was broken by a window, a door that they put here that went downstairs to the floor below. My parents didn't touch that. That was all here when we were here. Obviously, the restoration got rid of that. But we had to have that flow that they had started to go up and down. And then the other thing that we did up here on this floor, this had to be renovated to add 2 bathrooms. And so I'll explain a little bit more about that. And then they needed to convert the ground floor, which is the same floor plan as you see right here downstairs, except these 2 small bedrooms up here were not copied downstairs, and so this was just one elongated octagon down there. But down there, they had to do a lot. Had been used when my parents moved in for storage for farm produce. My understanding is it was full of onions and stuff coming out of the field, which was fine. I mean, that was what they needed it for, but we needed it for a different use. And so the room below the parlor in here became our new dining room. Then we needed to add a bedroom down there, which was over here. In other words, the west bedroom was a bedroom downstairs. That actually downstairs, we broke it into 2 bedrooms. As actually the Hutters had done, they broke the west bedroom into 2 bedrooms. And then we also had to create down there a kitchen and pantry, which is under a part of this space downstairs, and also back what's under this elongated octagon downstairs. We put those together to create service space for an oil furnace that had to go in down there, as well as a laundry area. So that's just a quick summary of the things that had to be done. I mentioned there was no central heating, so that's what the furnace was for. But one thing they didn't want to do was have radiators. Obviously, that would have been a blemish on the fabric of the house. So, 1946, what did they do? They put in thermal heat. So they were way ahead of their time. Now, to do that, they had to create channels in the original brick here for the pipes that held the steam. And then they were in the ceiling as well. You can see this when you go into this room. Also, speaking of the fire, when you're in this room here, this one incidentally will not be restored beyond what you see, so it will always be available for people to see this underneath all these wonderful walls. You can look in the mailbox for the chair rail and for the mantles, and if you look in there, you will see charred wood from the fire. So you can see the evidence of the fire. Below this room was also a square room, and it was Jefferson's wine cellar. It was just an open space. The Hunters put a floor over this area down there, and thank heavens they did, because we were able to use that area as our den downstairs. And we put my parents put a trap door in the back corner over there, so that you could go down into the wine cellar. And we used to play down there often. Wonderful place to have a hide and seek party or a very treasure party. Because the floor was actually earth, but if you dig down not very far, you hit brick. And so that was the kind of things that the way we used this house. But the den was, the walls down there are the original rock, and it's schist is the mineral. That are the central foundations for this house. We, my parents, whitewashed them to be, have white walls, and we called it the rock room. And so it was always the rock room to us, not the den. But we had a ping pong table down there. We had all kinds of games, and I remember the day when the television got horsed down these little stairways to be down there. So that was the central place we got together, with the exception of the kitchen, which was under this room. And that was many special memories of that, because my brother and sister went away to school when I was about 5 and 7. And so there was all homecomings for Thanksgiving and vacations and so forth. And we would always gather in the kitchen. There was a big kitchen table down there, and that was a working fireplace. And so you had a wonderful fireplace, food being cooked. We'd all sit around the table, seeing each other again after months at a time. So that was, I have special feelings about that room downstairs. So I think I covered my remarks I wanted to make, at least initially, about the house itself and our use of it. I can go into more detail, and I will perhaps towards the end of this. Now we'll talk a minute about what I was particularly interested in, which was the yard. It was a wonderland for a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old boy. You see, if you look at the parlor, you see the sunken lawn in the back. The house was built to be an optical illusion. It looks like a single-story house from the front, but in fact, the land was constructed and sculpted for it to be 2 stories in the back, so that you could have this full back portico. So you see a sunken lawn. I saw a football stadium with bleachers on both sides. And so that's the way I used it, and played football by myself out there for a lot of times. And then right out here, just outside to the northeast, was the biggest magnolia tree I think I've ever seen. It was on the high part of the lawn before it falls off. And it was not only just a fantastic climbing tree, the branches were so intertwined that it was almost small rooms up there, and you could sit on any branch and have no fear of falling on it at all, because there was so much to catch you. And they were a perfect, bridge of the enterprise, or anything you wanted it to be. But I spent a lot of time in that tree. We also had, up at front to the northwest, we had boxwood that I'll show you in a second. Let me do that now. Excuse me. So this is the front, the north portico. And I should have mentioned this before. This house is laid absolutely due north, south, east, west. And I know that in part because I remember being about 8 years old, standing on the front porch with my parents looking at the northern lights right up that road, right above, up in the sky, right above the tree line. But right out here, up against the outside of this boxwood, I'm sorry, the outside ring of the boxwood were obviously American box. They were 10 feet, 15 feet, maybe even taller than that. They were enormous. The English box were shrinking concentric circles. It was a maze with north, south, east, west avenues. And all the yellow jackets you can imagine. I have recurring problems with yellow jackets, so I was running into a cloud of them running around the center of this. The attic was also, all the yellow jackets that weren't in the box were in the attic. So, I have another yellow jacket story, but I'm not sure I'll get to it. But out here, up against the boxwood, on the outside of the boxwood, was a huge buckeye tree with a horizontal branch and sticking out and curving up that was, I don't know, 20 feet off the ground. And I'm accused of exaggerating. I'm not trying to, I'm really not. But it was the greatest rope swing you've ever seen, because you could get so high off the ground on both ends of it, and I love that buckeye tree. In 1954, a spin-off cyclone from Hurricane Hazel. Some of you remember Hurricane Hazel. The cyclone hit this property. Fortunately, it didn't hit the house itself. It did tremendous damage in our forest. We never saw our silo again, that silo. It was really a terrible storm. That buckeye tree came down into the house. And one of the branches came through I'll explain this in a minute, but into my bathroom, and also into the window in the bathroom for my brother's room, which was right below that. Huge branch, I don't know, maybe 12 feet through the window, completely into the room. My parents were not here. So I was just here with Gertrude and Courtney and Alice. We were all scared to death. We got through it, but at least 3, and I think 4 of these poplar trees, you see how tall they are now. You can imagine they were that tall then as well. And we lost, it was either 3 or 4 of those. Eric Probsting can probably tell me that. Eric, do you remember?
Something like that. I'm not sure.
I think it was 4. I mean, it was just an enormous storm. And I want to come back to Gertrude and Courtney, because that was one of the nights that I spent at their house when my parents were here. Actually, I stayed with Gertrude's parents, Armstead and Rucker and Carrie, his wife. So there was the buckeye tree. We had the mounds that you've seen on either side. Well, if you go to the top of the mound, one of those mounds, and you're 9 years old, and you start rolling down the side of that mound like a log of wood, if you do that 2 or 3 times straight, you'll get real dizzy and want to get sick, and you'll typically do it again. So there were the mounds, and the necessaries that the mounds were built to hide from view were wonderful things to play in. Courts, anything you wanted them to be, they were just spectacular. Let's see, I mentioned the boxwood. Also, to the southeast was, Eric, is that bamboo still there?
There's a little bit left. We've gotten rid of most of it.
There was an enormous stand of bamboo, so thick you couldn't begin to see through it. And that was a wonderful place to hide and play whatever kind of games you wanted. The poplar trees themselves were not climbable, in part because sometimes they had black snakes hanging from the road. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that. But how they got up there, I've never known. But they would get up there and they would just hang off. They're not low enough that you could run into them. But you didn't want to go up there. find out what they were thinking. But what I do remember doing a lot is simply lying under those poplar trees and looking up through the branches and the leaves at just the sky and the clouds going by. Back in the southwest corner was a Concord grape arbor, and there were plenty of grapes back there in the summertime. And Alice Carter would make the finest jam out of those Concord grapes, sealed with wax, at the top. And that was good stuff. These drawings are here to show something else that was in the yard. Originally, Jefferson had built the wing of offices that's been restored off to the east. That was not here. That was lost in the Hutter era, and I don't know whether they took it down or whether it just fell down or exactly what happened. But the Hutters built, and of course I didn't know it wasn't Jefferson era, a smokehouse. This is the east mound. Can you see this? Just dug into this east mound. This was the smokehouse that the Hutters had, and this was their old kitchen. And so there was the old kitchen and the smokehouse. And what my parents did was connect them and build a bathroom and closets in here. And this was for guests to stay in. Well, when I got on 13, 14, I took it over in the summertime because, if you remember the lay of the land, the backside of the walls, the north walls of these two buildings are under the ground. And so it was so much cooler out there than it was in the house that was just an ideal place to spend the summer. We also had the tenant houses that are to the southeast, to the east. Those are not Jefferson era, those are both Hutter era, 18 by 1851 era. 1857, sorry. And those were, plating those were accessible. And until my mother gussied them up and made another guest house out of them. And then actually when I moved back to Lynchburg in 1975, I had been practicing law out of state, my wife and I stayed in that guest house for about 6 months until we found a house. So we had use for it in that sense as well. Out to the southwest here, in the southwest corner of the lot, my mother built a rose garden. I remember very much it being built. It's brick, you can see it right there. And on the east wall of that rose garden, she copied the serpentine walls on the range from the university. There's no salute to Jefferson. And on the other side of that serpentine walls were a whole stand of fig trees that were wonderful as well. And then later on, my mom put in a pool behind that garden, between the garden itself and the pasture that's behind it, and there's a fence there. And that was a wonderful amenity. It was we had great fun out there. We actually even built created a croquet course in which the pool was in play. You had to go, one wicket was on one side of the pool, and the next wicket was on the other side, and it was your problem. And you got from one to the other. We also had a wicket in the pasture as well, so you had to go right there and come back. And finally, but last but not least, we had a rudimentary golf course. My parents, the men in the family, were very fine golfers, except for yours truly. But we did put together and with the use of the bamboo from the stand of bamboo, we did put together a 9-hole golf course using tomato cans as the cups, and punch holes in them and dig and put a flag together and stick it on a piece of bamboo and so forth. And that went from the northwest lawn all the way out to the pool as well.
Wow.
So there was a lot to do, and I did everything I could with what was here, and my brother and sister did as well. So when you talk about the farm, just a minute, it was a working dairy farm when my parents bought it. We had a herd of about 75 milk cows, mostly Holsteins, about maybe 15 or 20 Guernseys. We had a couple of horses, 2 roan horses, and one named Star because he had a white blaze on his forehead. The other named Misty because every horse of that era was named Misty. I think that's what it changed to. They were both roans. And we had a pony, fat pony named Ryder, who was mean as a horse. We rode him whenever he would let you. We had sheep, had about 20 head of sheep, which were in that red barn that's on the other side of the mound. Obviously, there was a big chicken coop on the other side of the tenant houses. The north tenant house was housed our farm manager, Elmer Obenchen, and his family. And the chicken coop, there was a shop behind it, also a gas pump. And behind the shop was a chicken coop. And we had pigs as well, big, Yorkshire pigs. And we mentioned this, the best ham in the world. Those hams were unbelievable. And the color of the meat was the color of deep of my father's desk. The darkest meat you've ever seen. Absolutely so smoky and salty. And I used to say ham wasn't any good if it didn't give you a nightmare. And that was a way to judge them. We had a big barn up on the way back, up on the right, with a milking parlor, a silo. The one that blew down, we replaced with a harvester. And I worked on the farm, a milking parlor, 3-stall milking parlor as well, and a big pasteurizing machine. And I did occasional work on the farm when things got bad enough in terms of hiring people that I was the only thing available. But that would include mucking at calf stalls and digging thistles in the pastures, getting up hay bales into the wagons and then stacking them up in the barn. My favorite, though, was driving a dump truck from the field where the combine had cut all the grain, and that would be, deposited in the back of those trucks. I didn't have a driver's license at the time, so that was a lot of fun. We had some pets I'll mention briefly, only because they were such a part of our lives. I'll mention my first one. If you go into the West Bedroom, which is where I grew up, the Hutters had built a wall along just inside that door. And it went over, not the complete way, it went over to a door. So they created a smaller bedroom and left a larger bedroom. I grew up in the smaller bedroom to the right. Incidentally, the West Bedroom is Jefferson's bedroom. I assumed that the East Bedroom was the bedroom because that was my parents' bedroom. And obviously they had Jefferson's. It turned out that was not true. But in that little room, I had a rooster named Reed. I got him as a chick. He was this big from State Farm over in the forest. I had a wooden packing crate with a knothole in it that so you could look in. And actually, the knothole was for the light bulb that was in there as well to keep him warm. Anyway, I didn't know he was a rooster until he turned out to be a rooster. And he got bigger and bigger and louder and louder. And he wasn't universally revered. Everybody in the house. So one day I came, actually I was in school, and I came home, and no packing box and no Reed. And so I inquired about that and was told that it was time for Reed to join his own kind. So he had been sent to the chicken house, to the chicken coop. What my mother didn't count on was that Reed had A, never seen a chicken since he was this big, and B, that there was a pecking order in the chicken coop, and so they made short work of Reed, which was a sad occasion for me. We had some wonderful dogs, a red setter named Pretzel, a black dachshund named Pickle, who in fact killed one of our pigs, a dachshund. He was strong as an ox and mean as anything. And he jumped on up and caught a pig. I wasn't there. I can only tell you what I was told. Repeatedly jumped up and caught a pig on the bottom of the pig's ear and chewed on that ear and chewed on that ear, and the pig bled to death. Oh. That was Pickle in a nutshell. He got away from me one time, and he was my sister's dog. I chased him all the way to Tomahawk Creek at the bottom of the hill, and before I got him, and rode him back. And then we had a series of Sealyham Terriers, which look like white Scotties, and they were wonderful dogs. And then the last pet I'll bore you with is we had a skunk, and he was actually my brother's pet more than anything else. My brother and the farm manager were naturalists. The farm manager's son, B. Barker was his name. He had a taxidermy book, and he and my brother there was no fauna on this place that was safe from them. They were going to catch, trap, anything they could find. And they decided they wanted to de-skunk the skunk that they had found. And so my mother, one day, here they come back from the creek, and they've got the skunk with them on something around his neck. And my mother said, wait a minute, this is not acceptable. And so they said, oh, it's fine, we de-skunked it. And she said, my God, where did you find ether? Which was the anesthetic at the time. And they said, oh no, we took care of it. She said, well, what did you do to it? She said, well, we had it down by the creek. And so we'd start working on it, the de-skunking. And he'd start screaming, we'd stick his head in the creek. Until he'd stop screaming. And then we'd bring him back up again and work on it some more, and then he'd put his head back in. So anyway, the result was they absolutely de-skunked him. And so my parents then had a cocktail party not long after that, and they lashed him to the front door so that everybody had to guilt him. Anyway, he finally ran away. But he was disarmed. So he was in harm's way. So I don't know, 6 months or so later, after he ran away, we heard this clunking outside the front porch. And we went there, and there was Victor with a huge mayonnaise jar stuck on his head. And so he had come home to get help. And so my father, I guess, took the thing off, and Victor sort of looked up in gratitude and ran off. So that's the end of the pet story. I've been asked before about visitors. What about people who would come, since it wasn't open to the public, how did we deal with that? And the answer was, it depended on who came and what they wanted and how pleasant they were and so forth. I sort of drew a line between visitors who were not in the house, in other words, they were not invited, and guests who were not only invited, but who were required to sign the guest book, which sat on the desk that I mentioned in the center of this room. And so one day, about 10 years ago, I just had a flash. Where is the guest book that we had? Well, my father had given it to Poplar Forest. So I went to Gale Pond, who was in charge of those. of the collections. And I said, do you by any chance have our guest book? And so sure enough, she did. So I borrowed it. I had to sign a form. I promised them, I don't know what would happen if I hadn't brought it back. But I had 4 digital copies made of it. And so this is one of them. And it starts in November of 47 and goes all the way to the end of 1980 when we sold the place. But I'm going to pass this around. Some of you may be in it. I know you are. And my friend Mary here is sister to my brother's widow. And so she's come all the way up from Charlotte for this talk. I didn't know she was going to come until a couple of days ago when her sister told me about it. But we're so glad that she's here. So anyway, pass this around and you'll see my mother started using red and blue pencils and stuff, so it's all washed up. Anyway, pass it around if you're interested. Other guests included people coming to parties, which we had not constant parties, but wonderful parties, particularly in our dining room, which was below the parlor. And if you can imagine, that's not necessarily you particularly, but 25 10-year-olds jumping up and down singing at the hop at the top of their lungs. That's the kind of thing we had. But later on, we also had some wonderful music, bluegrass bands and rock bands and things. You probably know bluegrass big as well. So we used the house in many wonderful ways that way. One particular visitor story. Sometimes I would see them out there if there were visitors unannounced, and I would go ahead and just say, I may even have one of them to know somebody was here and watching. And so they'd say, they'd ask a question or two, and I'd end up sort of giving them a tour. Not in the house, but around. And about the history of the house and so forth. Occasionally they'd tip, which was not good. First time I declined, and then I thought, I really ought to take advantage of this. But the last visitor story, one day in this front small bedroom, northeast bedroom in here, which was my parents' bathroom, my mother was in the tub in there, and we had kept on the porch a set of the rounded bricks that go together to make up the columns. And they stayed there always because we thought it would be nice for people to come just to see what the columns are made of. So the sectional bricks were there. She's in the bathtub, and she hears somebody on the front porch, which is right outside. And so there's somebody sort of seems to be there longer. She hears some noise she wasn't familiar with. Anyway, puts on a bathrobe and runs and looks out the window under the blinds. And here was this woman picking up the bricks, and she had walked down the steps and was taking the brick away. So my mother, in her bathrobe, went tearing out the front door and ran this woman down and made her give the brick back. So that's the kind of thing that can happen as well. Special memories in events, and that's the close of my presentation. Although I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards if you like. Christmas was unbelievable. With these, imagine, even lower 2.5 feet, you could easily get a 15-foot cedar tree in here, and we did. We got up early on Christmas Eve morning and got on a tractor with Corey Clark. He had already been scouting trees in the forest. And so we would go ahead and ride the tractor and cut the tree for Christmas, haul it back, and then he would get it set up here. And then we go to how many are from around here? Okay, well, St. Stephen's Church we were actually Presbyterians, but for Christmas Eve, we went to their wonderful, wonderful candlelight service. Never missed it. And then go visit with family in the house, in town, and then come back out here and decorate the tree. Totally old-fashioned. No lights, no tinsel, balls and other kinds of things that you hang on trees. But a tree as tall as they were really spectacular in here. And so my parents would sit in here and maybe have a cocktail and listen to music on Broadway stuff. And an album they brought back from the Caribbean called Calypso Christmas. I don't know if you know, fabulous. But anyway, I learned that by heart. Decorating the tree. So Christmas was a special time. It is for everybody, but it was special for me here. Another bad memory, or a bad memory, was this was a working fireplace in the parlor. And Courtney Clark one day when I was with him in the parlor was working the floor with neat foot oil to keep it from drying out. And so he had the oil on the floor. It was a hot day. The sun shining through the windows, and I was standing right beside it. Caught that neat foot oil on fire, and the fire leaped up like this. And 1845. That's what went through my head. Was that we were doomed. And Courtney was able to take a rag or something and get it put out. But there was a black fire mark in there until they replaced the when they did the restoration. So that was a memory that I still have, obviously. I mentioned homecomings in the kitchen. Those were really, really wonderful times. My sister, Kate, was married at St. Stephen's. Large wedding, but in a teeny little church. It was an event. But the reception was here on the South Lawn. And my mother had found somewhere a balustrade with two sets, like a balustrade with a column on one end of each of them. And so she had those in the sunken lawn, forming kind of an arbor out there. And it really was, it was just fantastic. But what I remember also about it was the next morning, I forgot to mention, for all the parking, we had taken down two sections of fence in the northwest front pasture up here. And so the parking was in that pasture and sort of down that hill. Waking up the next morning, and then of course the sections had to be put back because the cows were coming in the next morning. So I was driving somewhere the next morning, and I happened to look into that pasture, and there was a black Mercedes sedan in that pasture. The initials of the owner being Billy Harris. Then he knew Billy. But he had been unable to drive home. And so here was this black Mercedes with about 15 cows there. No, just saying, gee, Bert, what is this? So we had to get the farm guys to come take it so Billy could get his car. Another guest, I wasn't there. I didn't see this, but this is the story that's worth repeating. From Roanoke, some friends came, and one of them had been overserved before he got here. But he took exception to the Humpback Bridge, if you all know it. Every time I come here, I go over that bridge. I go out of my way to go over that bridge. Thankfully, they had fixed the road on the other side just since in the last 2 weeks, because there were huge potholes in it just a couple weeks ago. So I was able to do it without getting injured this time. But anyway, he took significant exception to going over that bridge. He was scared to death going over that bridge. And so on the way back after the wedding, he had an additional surgery or two. He refused to go over the bridge. And so he said, I'm getting in a car and I'm going to walk over the bridge. Story is that walking, he cold missed the bridge. And it was only the saplings and everything that was growing down the side of that before you get to the grade, that kept it from going all the way down. So anyway, that was the rest of those. Now, my own special favorite is this. For the bicentennial in 1976, excuse me, before I ask this or mention this, does anybody here know what during the war in the Navy, what a subchaser was? Okay, well, they were ships, many of them which had been mothballed from World War I. They were fighting U-boats in World War I. Some of them were new, built for World War II. But they were small, they were bigger than PT boats, and narrower, and they had a different purpose. But my father commanded subchasers in the war, so he was gone all during the war on those boats, trying, hunting, defending the country that Jefferson worked so hard to defend. And so we wanted to have an appropriate celebration, although small. So I had some friends from law school over. We were just a couple years out of school, and also the family who was here. My father came back from the war with the bell from one of his ships, and I had it. And right to the left of that doorway, between the doorway and the fireplace, was a small chest of drawers, and this sat on that chest of drawers every day. Imagine though that it was navy gray. My stepmother, after my mother and my father were married to a wonderful, she wanted to do something great for him on his birthday, and so she took this beautiful navy bell and had all the paint removed and shined this thing up so it was bright, shiny brass. And it's sad. And of course he had to, be very pleased with what she done, which is a painful thing, I'm sure. But anyway, so the group of us, only about 10 or so of us, were right on the side portico looking up at this fantastic building. And if you'll forgive me, that's how we celebrate. Thank you for your attention. I've told that story before about to a crowd like this, and people go, "What a big deal." So I thought I'd better bring it down. So I can't thank you enough for being here. I'm happy to try to answer. Wait a second, Mary, what is our schedule?
We've got about 10 more minutes before we open the house to tours again.
Okay.
So you all are welcome to stay and know about the house
okay, that's fine.
and talk
All right, great.
or a tour.
All right, I can take one at a time. Is that the deal? Not one person, one half.
It's hard to move this many people
Okay.
in the house.
A
So
third?
I would say maybe
But how about this? Would anybody else like to have a tour, let's say, of the downstairs? Because you've been there. Okay. Okay. Maybe 10 or 15 people, something like that? All right. Well, we'll need to go outside. Can we go downstairs? Yeah, we can go over here. So let's do that. All right, let me ask you this before that. Are there any questions that anyone,
It sounds like you did most of your living downstairs. What took, y'all snuffed up on this?
Yes, I'm sorry. This was Jefferson's bedroom, also our bedroom. This was my sister's bedroom and I shared it. And we installed, my parents had in this small bedroom, well, can't show it now, had installed, they put in a bathroom back here to serve that bedroom. This was my parents' bedroom, and they had a bathroom here to serve that bedroom. So up here, and there was a powder room in there, and we added that kind of stuff, closets and stuff. And so this is a simple house. I mean, it's 2 bedrooms. I mean, that's what he designed it for. The lower floor was for total service. And so I don't know how often he went down there. There's some indication that Jefferson's valet Burl Culver, studied down there, and there's an exhibit down there on Burl. But other than that, it was, I'm sure he almost never went down there. I mean, that would be my assumption. So yes, it was just this big room and these 2 bedrooms, but then downstairs we had the kitchen where we spent a whole lot of time, and the den or rock room, as we call it, where we spent a lot of time. And my brother's bedroom was downstairs and under that. Yeah. It was our living room. So the same use, effectively. And that was a working fireplace. And the one in the kitchen was still a working fireplace. The others were not. And it was, we spent a fair amount of time, who spends time in the living room? And that's the case here, even though what the walk through.
Yeah, I found out several years ago, I don't know if you knew this or not, I always thought that boxwoods smelled like skunks. And the reason they do is that skunks like to live in boxwoods.
I see.
Which is why you probably had the skunk, because you had
The first one,
boxwoods.
that's good. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed being here with you, and I'd love to take some folks around, particularly downstairs, so we don't disturb tours. If anybody would like to go. Thank you.